we've all done it. You look around at the world and just wonder, why isn't it perfect, right? It's one of the oldest and most profound questions we've ever asked. So today, we're going to explore this massive paradox, one that has troubled thinkers for millennia. And we're going to do it by looking at an ancient dialogue that offers a surprisingly elegant answer. So, at its core, the puzzle is pretty simple. Think about it. If a perfect artist creates a painting, you'd expect a perfect painting. So if a perfect, all good, all-powerful source is behind all of reality, why isn't reality perfect? Why is there so much pain, loss, and confusion? This isn't some new question we just cooked up. Nope, this was asked with incredible urgency thousands and thousands of years ago. All right, let's meet our seeker. His name was Vidura, a really wise and righteous guy from ancient India. But, even with all his wisdom, he was just haunted by this fundamental contradiction he saw at the heart of everything. And he just couldn't let it go until he found an answer. This wasn't just some intellectual game for Vidura. I mean, you can feel the pain in his words, right? He felt trapped, describing it as this impossible knot in his mind that he was desperate for someone to cut. So he took this burning question to a famous sage named Maitreya. And look, Vidura didn't just ask some vague question. He laid out the exact logical problems that were tormenting him. He's asking, okay, if the ultimate reality is complete and perfect, how can it even do anything? If it's totally satisfied, why would it even want to create a universe? And then the really big one, if the divine is inside every single living being, why do we as individuals suffer so much? These are incredibly sharp questions. So how in the world does the sage Maitreya respond to this seemingly impossible tangle of questions? Well, he doesn't tackle them one by one. Instead, he offers a single concept, kind of like a master key that completely reframes the whole problem. He doesn't just solve the puzzle, he shows Vidura that he's been looking at the puzzle all wrong. And that key, it's just one word, Maya. This single concept is the foundation for his entire explanation. So what exactly is Maya? Maitreya explains it's a divine energy, but it's illusory. Its job is to create a reality where illogical things, like a perfect being creating an imperfect world, somehow seem to make sense. But its most powerful effect is on us. It causes our eternal self to basically forget who it really is and mistakenly identify with our temporary body and mind. Now, to make this pretty abstract idea perfectly clear, Maitreya uses a brilliant analogy. He says our true self, the Atman, is like the moon in the sky. It's just up there, serene, whole, and shining. But the us that we experience every day, that's like the moon's reflection in a pool of water. The reflection seems to tremble and break apart and get all distorted whenever ripples, the ups and downs of life, disturb the water. And this just nails the core of Maitreya's answer. The suffering, the change, the imperfection, all of that is happening to the reflection, not to the real moon. The real you, your actual consciousness, is always untouched, always whole. It's just like the moon in the sky, totally unaffected, no matter how chaotic the water below gets. Our suffering comes from mistaking that shaky reflection for who we really are. Okay, that's a really profound idea, but it immediately brings up another question, doesn't it? If we're all living in this illusion, constantly thinking we're the reflection, how do we ever break free? And that brings us to the practical side of things, how to actually see beyond the illusion. This is pretty much what Vidura asks next. It's the logical follow-up, right? Okay, I get the analogy. I'm the moon, not the reflection. But everything I see, everything I experience is the reflection. So how do I look up and see the real moon? Maitreya lays out a clear three-step process. First, the method. It's called Bhakti Yoga. This is a path of active, loving service. It's a practice of focusing your energy and attention with a sense of connection and purpose. Second, this sincere practice acts as a catalyst. It attracts what the text calls divine grace. You could think of it as how focused intention helps clear away all that mental clutter, letting a new kind of clarity shine through. And the result? The powerful influence of that illusory energy, Maya, starts to fade, kind of like fog burning off in the morning sun. And the effect of this is total. Maitreya says that when the illusion recedes, all the anxieties and pains of the reflection just vanish completely. The peace that's left is compared to what a person feels in a deep, dreamless sleep, just a state of pure, undisturbed consciousness. So Vidura has his answer. The paradox is solved. That knot in his mind is finally cut. Now you'd think that's the end of the story, right? But what happens next is maybe the most fascinating part of this whole conversation. Just look at Vidura's response. He feels this huge sense of relief. He says the sword of your words has totally shattered his doubt. But then, listen to what he says next. Now my mind runs to understand. The answer didn't put his mind to sleep. It supercharged it. As soon as that main mental block was gone, his curiosity just exploded. It was like a dam breaking. He was no longer stuck on, why is the world so broken? Now, he was free to ask, how does this incredible world actually work? The questions just start pouring out of him. He begins with the biggest scale you can imagine, the cosmic stuff. He wants to understand the entire structure of the universe, right from the very beginning. Then he zooms in, from the cosmic to the biological. He wants to know about the origin of all the different species and how life came to be in all its forms. And he doesn't stop there. He asks about the nature of time itself, about how societies should be structured, about the lives of historical sages, the meaning of ancient texts. It just goes on and on. His mind is absolutely on fire with a desire to learn. And here's the key takeaway. A truly profound answer doesn't shut down your curiosity, it unleashes it. By solving Vidura's one paralyzing paradox, Maitreya didn't just give him peace, he gave him the freedom to ask 1,000 more interesting, more expansive questions. Which kind of leaves us with a final thought. We all have those big, not-like questions, the ones that can hold our minds hostage. Vidura's story really invites us to ask ourselves, what's the one fundamental question in your life that, if answered, wouldn't just bring you peace, but would unlock a whole new universe of curiosity and learning for you?
I want you to imagine, just for a second, that you are the supreme being. You're absolutely perfect. You are completely self-satisfied. You're floating in eternal bliss outside of time, outside of space, and you lack absolutely nothing.
Sounds like a pretty good gig.
It's the ultimate gig. But here's the riddle, and it is one of the oldest and most frustrating problems in philosophy. If you are that perfect, that complete, why in the world would you bother creating this?
This being the universe.
The universe, the mess, the taxes, the flu, traffic jams, heartbreak. If you don't need anything, why make the effort? It implies a lack of something, doesn't it?
It does.
I mean, if you build a house, it's because you need shelter. If you cook, it's because you're hungry. Action usually implies a need.
It implies a motivation driven by deficiency. Okay. And on the flip side, if we, at our core, are spiritual beings, eternal and conscious, how do we end up trapped in these fragile bodies? It seems like a terrible deal.
Exactly. It's the ultimate contradiction. And that contradiction is exactly where we're going today. We are doing a deep dive into the Śrīmad Bhagavatam, specifically Canto 3, Chapter 7. This is a text that does not shy away from the hard questions.
Not at all. We're looking at a dialogue between Vidura and the sage Maitreya. And to set the scene, Vidura isn't just some casual student. He's a statesman, a highly intelligent man who, walked away from royal corruption to find the truth.
Right.
And he's sitting down with Maitreya, and he is essentially interrogating reality.
I think that's an important distinction. Often in these ancient texts, the student is very submissive, just nodding along saying, "Yes, master." But Vidura comes in swinging.
He does.
He respects Maitreya. He calls him a friend of the great sage Vyasa, but he's not afraid to say, hey, the math isn't mathing here.
He really does. He starts right out of the gate with a challenge about the nature of God, or Bhagavatam. And Vidura throws two specific Sanskrit terms on the table, chinmatra and nirguna.
Okay, let's break those down. What are we looking at?
So chinmatra means pure consciousness, or pure spirit.
Okay.
And nirguna means without material qualities.
Okay, so purely spiritual. No physical baggage, no material attributes.
Right. So Vidura asks, if the Supreme is pure spirit, how can he engage in Lila or pastimes in the material world? How do you get qualities out of something that has no qualities?
It's a category error. It's like asking how a ghost can eat a physical cheeseburger. I mean, if he enters the material world, doesn't he become contaminated by it?
Exactly. But Vidura goes deeper in verse 3. This is the motivation problem we started with. He uses the analogy of a child plane to try and make sense of it, but even that falls apart for him.
A child playing, I mean, usually that's a happy image. The Lord is like a playful child.
It is, but think about why a child plays. Vidura argues a child plays because they want a toy they don't have,
Yeah.
or because they are bored. The motivation is desire, a lack of stimulation,
But the texts say God is svata tripta,
self-satisfied,
self-satisfied.
completely full. So Vidura catches Maitreya in a logical trap. If God creates, he must have a desire. If he has a desire, he creates out of need. If he has a need, he isn't perfect.
That is a solid argument. You can't be self-satisfied and wanting to create a universe at the same time. Those seem mutually exclusive.
Precisely. But Vidura doesn't stop with God. He turns the spotlight on us, the Jiva, or the soul. And this is his version of the problem of evil, or really, the problem of stupidity.
Stupidity.
Well, listen to the description. Vidura says the living entity is avalupta avabodha.
Okay.
That means possessing unfailing consciousness. We aren't stupid by nature. The soul is spiritually aware and free.
So if we are smart, spiritual, and free,
Then why would we ever voluntarily get entangled in durbhagatvam, misfortune, and kalesha suffering? It makes no sense. Why would a free bird fly into a cage and lock the door?
hey, I'm eternally happy. Let me go worry about my credit score and lower back pain for 40 years.
Exactly. It contradicts the logic of self-preservation. And Vidura is genuinely distressed here. In verse 7, he admits, "My mind is distressed by this crisis of ignorance."
Yeah.
He's basically saying, Maitreya, stop the car. I want to get off. This reality doesn't make sense.
I appreciate that vulnerability. He's not just asking for academic points. This is an existential crisis. He's looking at the theology, looking at the reality of suffering, and saying, these two things cannot both be true.
Yeah.
So how does the sage respond? Does he get defensive?
Quite the opposite. Verse 8 says Maitreya smiled. The word is smayan. The text even describes him as gatasmaya, which means free from arrogance or pride. He wasn't threatened by the hard questions, he was delighted by them.
That's the sign of a true expert. If you get mad at the question, you probably don't know the answer. So how does he solve the paradox?
Maitreya's answer in verse 9 is fascinating. He essentially says, you are right. Logically, it is a contradiction.
Wait, his defense is, you're right, it makes no sense.
His defense is that this is the very nature of Bhagavat Maya, the Lord's energy of illusion. He uses the phrase yana yana virudite. It appears contradictory to logic.
Huh.
The function of Maya is to make the impossible seem possible. It makes the free soul feel bound, and it makes the Supreme Master appear to be caught up in the world.
So it's a magic trick. The free soul feels bound, and the self-satisfied God appears active.
It's a deeply powerful illusion. And to explain how this works, how the free soul thinks it's suffering, Maitreya uses a very visceral, slightly graphic analogy in verse 10, the headless man.
Yeah, I read this. It's pretty intense.
Okay, so imagine you were having a nightmare, and in the dream, you see your own head has been cut off.
Okay, terrifying.
You are screaming, you are in pain, you're mourning your own death, the suffering is acute, you are genuinely traumatized in that moment. But is your head actually cut off?
No, I am safe in bed. My head is right where it belongs.
But the experience of the pain is real to the dreamer. Maitreya is arguing that material existence is exactly like that dream. The soul, the Atman, is never actually cut or burned or sad or poor. But because of Maya, we identify with the body and mind, the dream avatar, and so we suffer factual pain from illusory events.
That is a heavy concept. It validates the suffering. It admits that it feels real, while simultaneously denying the cause. We're crying over decapitation that never happened.
Exactly. The pain is factual, but the wound is fictional.
But knowing it's a dream doesn't always stop the nightmare. He gives a second analogy in verse 11, which I found a bit more calming, more practical, the moon in the water.
This is a classic of Vedantic philosophy, the text says. Imagine the moon reflected in a pool of water. If the wind blows, the water ripples.
And the reflection looks like it's shaking. It looks distorted.
Right, but the moon in the sky, it hasn't moved an inch. It's steady. Maitreya explains that the drashtu, the seer, the soul, is like the moon. The body and mind are like the water.
So when life gets chaotic, sickness, stress, market crashes, relationship drama, that's just the water shaking.
Yes, the soul thinks I am shaking, but it's just the reflection. This is a profound tool for resilience or, mental health.
It really is. It allows you to disidentify. I am not the one having the panic attack. My body is the water, and the water is choppy today.
Precisely. You are the observer of the turbulence, not the victim of it.
But Maitreya doesn't just leave us with philosophy. He gives a method to actually stop the shaking, or at least to realize we are the moon.
He does. In verses 12 through 14, he prescribes a combination of nivritti dharma detachment and bhakti yoga devotion. He says you can't just try to mentally force the water to be still. You have to attach your consciousness to something higher.
The text uses some poetic imagery here, the pollen of the lotus feet.
Charanaravinda paraga. It sounds flowery, but the mechanism is practical. The mind needs engagement. Pollen implies sweetness, fragrance, a sensory engagement. By focusing the senses on the supreme, the illusion fades. He says the suffering vanishes, samsuptasyeva, like a person waking from a deep sleep.
I like that. You don't fight the monster in the dream, you just wake up.
And once you wake up, the monster isn't defeated, it just ceases to exist.
So Vidura gets this. The text says his sword of doubts was slashed by Maitreya's words. But then the conversation shifts to happiness. And I want to spend a moment here because this feels like a sociological study that could have been written yesterday.
You're talking about verse 17, what we might call the happiness curve.
Yeah. We usually assume that as you get smarter, you get happier.
Huh.
Knowledge is power, right? But Maitreya and Vidura suggest it's a U-shaped curve.
Correct. Maitreya identifies three classes of people regarding happiness. On the far left, you have the mudatama. These are the totally foolish or the extremely ignorant.
The ignorance is bliss crowd.
They don't worry about the meaning of life. They don't stress about the future or the nature of reality. They just eat, sleep, and exist. And the text says they are happy.
Okay, so that's one end of the U-curve. Who is on the other end?
The other ends are those who have transcended the intellect, Buddha Paramgata. These are the enlightened souls who have realized they are the moon, not the water. They are also happy.
So the fool is happy and the sage is happy. Who is stuck in the middle?
The antarita, the people in between.
Yeah.
The ones who are intelligent enough to ask questions, but not enlightened enough to find the answers. The text says, Klishantai, they are the ones who suffer.
That is uncomfortably relatable. I think that's where most of us live. We're too smart to be oblivious, but not wise enough to be peaceful. We're just smart enough to be anxious.
That is the human condition for the thinking person. You're aware of death, aware of injustice, aware of your own limitations, but you haven't transcended them. It's a painful place to be. You're analyzing the dream, but you haven't woken up.
It's the mid-wit meme from the internet, literally in a 5,000-year-old text. So if you're in the misery middle, what's the strategy? You can't just lobotomize yourself and go back to being a fool.
No, regression isn't an option. Vidura says in verse 19 that the only way is forward. You have to cross that difficult path through service to Janardana, the Lord, and specifically through the association of those who are already on the other side.
So push through to transcendence. Don't try to retreat to ignorance.
Exactly.
Now, this is where the episode takes a turn. We are about halfway through the chapter, and the heavy philosophy is essentially settled. Vidura understands the why of the dream, the illusion, the paradox, but then his curiosity just explodes.
It does.
He switches gears from why are we here to how does this whole thing work?
It is a massive shift. From verse 21 all the way to 42, it's like he pulls out a clipboard. He wants to know the physics, the biology, the sociology of the universe. He basically outlines the curriculum for the rest of the Śrīmad Bhagavatam.
It's a huge list. He starts with the creation sequence, the Mahatattva or cosmic intelligence, and the Virat Purusha, the universal form. But then he gets surprisingly specific about biology. I was reading verse 27, and he asks about the classification of species.
This is fascinating because it gives us a glimpse into ancient biological taxonomy. He asks Maitreya to describe the 4 types of life forms based on their birth.
Let's run through these because it's quite comprehensive.
First, Jaryuja, literally born from the placenta. That covers humans and mammals. Second, Angio, born from eggs, birds and reptiles.
Standard stuff so far.
Then Udivija, born from sprouting. That covers the entire plant kingdom. But the 4th one is interesting, Svetaja,
Which means?
born from sweat.
Born from sweat, like actual perspiration.
Well, it refers to moisture. Ancient observations saw that bugs, microbes, and certain insects appear to generate spontaneously in warm, moist environments like sweat or decomposing matter. It's their category for microlife in insects.
That's wild. So he wants the breakdown of everything from bacteria to banyan trees to elephants. But he doesn't stop at biology. He pivots to sociology.
He does. He asks about the varnas, the social orders, and the ashramas, the spiritual stages. He wants to know about the guna avatars, the incarnations controlling the modes of nature like Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. But what really stood out to me is that he asks about the heretics, too.
The Pakanda.
Yes. In verse 32, he asks about the path of the Vedas, but he also explicitly asks about the path of those who go against the Vedas.
Why would he ask a holy sage about atheists or heretics?
Because Vidura is a statesman. He wants the full picture of society. He knows that to understand the world, you can't just look at the pious people. You have to understand the dissenters, the different philosophical schools, the people who reject the system.
He wants a complete map of reality, not just the nice parts.
Exactly. He also asked about civic duty. He mentions digging wells and public works. He asks about the results of charity and sacrifices. It shows that this spirituality isn't just about sitting in a cave meditating. It's about how to run a society, how to be a good citizen, how to organize a civilization so that people can actually prosper.
Speaking of being a good citizen, in verse 36, Vidura makes a really touching point about the teacher-student relationship. He basically tells Maitreya, look, I might be asking stupid questions.
He says, gurus are compassionate to the fallen. They should speak the truth to their disciples, even if the disciple doesn't know how to ask the question perfectly.
I don't know what I don't know, so tell me.
It shows his humility. He's thirsty for knowledge, and he trusts Maitreya to fill in the blanks.
And as we get to the very end of the chapter, Vidura circles back to that idea, charity. We talked about digging wells, which is great. Everyone needs water. But he says there is a form of charity that is far superior.
This is verse 41. It's a powerful statement to end his questionnaire. You can do all the sacrifices, give all the money, perform all the penance, but none of that equals even a fraction of the value of Jiva Apaya Pradhan.
Giving fearlessness to the living entities.
Giving fearlessness.
I want to drill into that. How do you give someone fearlessness? Do you give them a gun, a security system, a bunker?
You give them knowledge. Think back to the headless man analogy we started with. Why is the man screaming?
Because he thinks he's dying. He's terrified. He thinks he's lost his head.
Exactly. If suffering comes from the illusion, from the nightmare that we are these temporary bodies, then we are constantly afraid. Afraid of death, afraid of loss, afraid of pain. That fear is the background noise of material life.
Right. We are the trembling water, terrified of the wind.
So when you give someone spiritual knowledge, when you tell them, you are the moon, not the reflection, you are the dreamer, not the headless corpse, you remove the root of their fear. That is the ultimate charity. You aren't just giving them a sandwich that feeds them for a day, you are freeing them from the nightmare entirely.
That puts a whole new perspective on what we're doing right now. Sharing knowledge isn't just teaching, it's a rescue mission.
Precisely. It is the highest welfare work. And the chapter closes with Shukara Vikaswami telling us that Maitreya was pravrita harsha. He was highly delighted.
Because he finally had a student who was ready to hear it.
A teacher loves nothing more than a student who is genuinely desperate to know. It allows the teacher to speak about the Supreme, which is their greatest joy.
So we've gone from a massive theological paradox, why a perfect God creates an imperfect world, to the solution of the dream state, explored the misery of the midwit, and finally opened up this massive curriculum of cosmic questions.
It's a journey from confusion to clarity, and then from clarity to exploration. Vidura starts distressed, but once the why is answered, he's ready to explore the how with enthusiasm.
And I think for me, the takeaway is that moon and water analogy. The next time I feel the stress rising or the world feels like it's falling apart, I'm going to try to remember. The agitation is just the reflection.
It is the key to resilience. Observe the shaking, but don't become the shaking.
And I want to leave you, the listener, with that thought about the happiness curve. The fool is happy and the sage is happy. It's the person in the middle who suffers.
The question is, are we suffering because we are stuck in the middle? Too aware to be ignorant, but not yet aware enough to be free.
And if we are, the only way out is through. You can't go back to sleep. You have to wake up fully.
That is the only way.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. It's been a mind-bending session.
Always a pleasure.
Keep asking the hard questions. We'll see you next time.
Okay, let's tackle one of the oldest spiritual questions there is. Our story starts with a conversation between Vidura, the seeker, and Maitreya, the wise sage. Vidura asks the big one, how can a perfect God create an imperfect, changing world? He really breaks it down. All these inconsistencies left him feeling completely stuck, you know? Maitreya's answer is kind of surprising. He says it's not about logic, but about what we perceive as real. He brings up this pivotal idea.
Maya, which you can think of as a cosmic illusion.
To explain, Maitreya uses this beautiful analogy of the soul as a reflection in shaky water. The moon itself, it's totally unaffected. The distortion is just in the water, not the moon. In the same way, our true spiritual self stays pure, separate from the material world's chaos. But here's the thing, this illusion isn't permanent. The sage says it can actually be dispelled. So Vidura's main doubt is gone, but he realizes this answer is just the beginning. So he asks for the complete blueprint of the universe, from physics right down to the purpose of life. And what's really fascinating is Maitreya's reaction. He isn't overwhelmed at all, he's delighted. It just shows that sincere, deep inquiry is seen as the highest way to connect with the divine. This whole story shows that maybe the real joy isn't just in the answer, but in the quest itself.